Good evening. This is Dale M. Gardner-Webb. This is Zoom night for Mels 605, summer 2016. This is our third Zoom session. I've got a little after 7 o'clock. I hadn't had anybody join me yet, but that's okay. I'll get started with the material that we're covering tonight. First thing I want to go to is to Blackboard. And remind you that if you are doing an assistant principal or principal interview this week, one of your choices on your weekly schedule was to do an assistant principal interview. If that is the case, I have a guide for you on interviewing protocol. It's under syllabus on our on our Blackboard main menu. That document looks like this. So here is the administrative protocol. Here are the questions that I would expect. This is not a requirement, but these are the kinds of things that I would expect you to ask during your interview. Not just discipline or not just about parents or not just, this is a more generalist, covers more things. So again, this can be found under syllabus on the main menu, a guide for your interviews if you do choose to do an administrative interview this week. To that end, let's look at the summer schedule for this week. So this is week 3 that we are in right now. The Achieve model, some of you did the discussion board on that. It was very good. Assistant principal interview can be done this week, and so discussion board 7 and 8 and discussion board AP interview are your choices this week, and then your Hershey and Glickman readings, and so that's where we are. I wanted to go back and look at some things from last week because we crashed last week. Blackboard crashed, and so we had to end a little early. North Carolina Standard for School Executive Human Resources, what principals can do to keep high flyers in their school, feedback and development, recognition, responsibility advancement, give them resources. Here are the things that you can do. This is much like the good to great. Give examples, recognize, reward, give explicit how-to directions. This also echoes what the Hemrick article that's also on last week's Zoom board, it was in session 2, that says if teachers are happy and are empowered, are treated professionally, given recognition, given authority, autonomy, all those kinds of things, that they do a better job. Kids' scores, test scores are higher, they stay around. All these things kind of feed together. Now, we've talked about transformational leadership. We've talked about participative leadership. And everybody wants to be that great leader, that great transformational leader. And everybody says, yes, that's the kind of leadership that I'm going to practice. To that end, on tonight's lesson, on Zoom lesson 3, I have a quiz. Let's see if I can bring that up. Okay. Let me take that one down. And we've already looked at the weekly schedule. Let's look at okay, what is your leadership style? This is about.com. The link is on this week's Zoom session where you can go in and take the leadership quiz to find out. You say you want to be a transformational participative leader, but if you take the quiz, do you know the right things to do to be that kind of leader? When it comes to decisions, I have final say. I accept a lot of input from my team. I let group make their own decisions. Let's see how I can do on it myself here. I believe that the transformational leadership answer is I make the final decision, but I accept a lot of input from my team. This would be authoritative. This would be laissez-faire. I just let them decide to do whatever they want to do. This would be participative, shared, or transformational leadership. I consider suggestions made by others in the group all the time. Collaboration is the key to success. Not always I rely on the group to decide. That, again, that's laissez-faire. That's no leadership. So you can take this quiz. I've done the first two here for you, so you know what the answer are, the first two. But what you might want to do this week is take the time. I won't go through all of this, but take the time to take this quiz and see if you know what types behaviors would be expected of you. And what I want you to do is when you take this quiz, I want you to think about, is this what I know to be the right answer, and so I'll choose this, or is this what I would actually do? And see, therein lies the rub, the divide or the gulf, or the distance between what you know you should do as a transformational leader and what your personal tendency to do is. Sometimes they're very different. Hopefully, this quiz, it's not a very long one, and it'll give you the answer. Again, it's found under Zoom session 3. Hopefully, this quiz will give you some idea how big a divide there is between what you know you ought to do and what your first inclination to do is as a leader. That's very important. That's self-awareness. Know thyself. That's also in our discussion boards, in our reading, the Johari window. This is a really good measure of, oops, I know that's the right answer, but this is what I would really do, or this would be what I would want to do, or this is what my first inclination is. This is a good know thyself activity, because I'm sure all of you know which ones you ought to pick. But what is your first inclination? So that's under tonight's lesson plan. Make sure you cover that. That's a really good one. Okay. All right. Okay, I want to move into what makes a good principal. Again, this piggybacks on last week and again to this week in terms of you know what you should do. Is that your first inclination? Is that what you really do? This is from the other side of the desk. Okay, we've been talking about from the administrative side, from a teacher's side, what makes a good principal. This is also under our weekly session tonight. This teacher says, I never had the desire to be a school administrator, not for 1 second. I've always known that my place is in front of a classroom with chalk in my hand. Make that an erasable marker. You pick the color. Even though I'm a non-administrator type, I have a message for others who seek to be school principals in the future. This person is not a bad teacher, obviously. They're the state teacher of the year. And she had an opportunity to visit a number of school communities across North Carolina to talk to teachers and support staff, parents, and students about what makes a good school-based administrator. And so here are her results. Principles of great principles. School is a family. Again, shared leadership, make people, efficacy, make them feel effective, give them power, give them authority, give them autonomy, empower them to be leaders. Teachers are treated as professionals. Given respect, flexibility, autonomy, it's called, obviously that's called empowerment. Of course, thinking back to 602, I hope you remember that there are two types of empowerment. Pardon my NASCAR reference, but Big E and Little E. Little E empowerment is empowerment as a classroom leader. That means you're great in the classroom and you're empowered to do the things that you do in there, and nobody bothers you, and you are a practitioner of Marzano's 9 high yield strategies and you're great at it. Obviously, that's the basis of the teacher evaluation system in North Carolina. We all know that whether we call it Power Source or whether we call it McReal or whatever the current name for our teacher evaluation system in North Carolina, it's all based on Marzano's 9 high yield strategies, and that's empowerment as a classroom leader. You're a leader in your classroom. You use those. You're left alone to make the best educational decisions in your room. There's also Big E empowerment. That's empowerment as a school-wide leader, when teachers get the opportunity to step outside of their classroom and lead in the school. According to Todd Whitaker, those would be things like teach other teachers, be involved in the creation of the school improvement plan, be involved in curriculum decisions, be involved in resource decisions, and then the holy grail of being a leader outside of your classroom as a classroom teacher is be involved in personnel decisions. So, treat teachers as a professional, empower them in their own classroom, and empower them in the school at large. Instruction in the school is data-driven. We understand EVOS. We know that each child has a projected score. We look at results and what teachers get the best scores teaching what classes. We know where we are. We know what we're not doing. We know what each subgroup is. We collect enough data and analyze that data, and then we make data-based decisions. We actually let data inform those decisions. I taught a statistics class a while back for Gardner Webb. Excuse me. And I went through a decision-making process in statistics class where I introduced an algorithm for decision making. And the whole idea was at each part or at each particular piece of the decision making process that you would use data to inform your decision. It's just linear calculus. It's not really that big. But this particular algorithm, the whole idea is there were 10 different variables, and each one of those variables needed to be measured, and we needed to use data to assess those variables so that we could come out with a decision making that those decisions were informed by data. I had a person in the class who after having heard this, saw me do all the calculus on the board, and we worked through this thing for a couple of hours. His first question is where do we have where in the process do we have the human input if we want to do something else? And I was like, that's the whole idea. You should want to do something else. You let data inform your decisions. If you're just going to do what you want to do, then don't bother to go through the process, and don't bother to tell people that you're making data-based decisions. You're not. Anywhere your personal feelings or prejudice or preferences come into the process, then that's not data. That's just, you were going to make that decision anyway. Data, you didn't let data get in the way. And so truly data-driven instruction means that if I'm teaching biology and I'm the beginning teacher and I get better scores than the teacher who is not the beginning teacher, who is the veteran career teacher, then I should be teaching biology. My kids get better scores. It doesn't matter that there is no turn. I hired a young lady to teach in the social studies department of a large urban high school in Charlotte. And after the first semester, I moved her up into AP, and she said, "But it's not my turn yet." I said, "Your kind of scores you're getting, there is no such thing as turn." Some of the veteran teachers did not like that, but she got better scores than them because she was a much better teacher than they were. And that's what we're talking about as an administrator, putting into practice data-driven instruction. The best teachers teach your most critical classes, but there are other data inputs too. But the big picture there is you share those things, that you work those 9 high yield strategies. And those 9 high yield strategies are called high yield strategies from Marzano because they yield results. There is data to support that they get better test scores. The best principals are student-centered. They understand that everything they do is about students, that they won't like working with adults, but the purpose of the working with the adults is to affect the lives of children. I always said that you need to understand that you want to be in a building run by adults for children, not run by children, or not run by adults for adults. You need to be a principal that understands your building needs to be run by adults for children. But the back balance, the bottom line, whatever you want to call it, the end result is always student achievement. That's why we're there every day. We're not an employment agency, although that is a viable part of what we do. But the purpose of school is not to provide people with opportunities for jobs. The purpose of school is to educate children. And that's what student-centered means, that we do what's best for them, period. So when we're looking at a hierarchy of, when we're scheduling the school, when we're doing duty roster, when we're doing supervision schedules, when we're doing all those things in the OMA that we did back in Mels 603, that we understand that there's a priority. This is not being ugly, but there's a priority. Federal law comes first, state law, local board policy, best practices, and then teacher input. You can't always let teachers do what they want to do if it's not the right thing for kids. Everybody can't have 2 planning periods a day. It drives our numbers up in our other classes. Can't do that. So we need to make sure that we stay student-centered. They reach out to families. They understand that family is the key. When you did your SKIP, your school community involvement plan, and your pastoring portfolio, the thing that you were supposed to do in A was to find the gaps in communication in your community and find ways to better communicate with them so that you could get them in to your school to do things like long-term things like family math night or family reading night or college night or those kinds of things where you could help parents help their children. One of the better activities that I had for a long-term goal for a SKIP was at Northwest Guilford High School, where they do a college day, and they bring parents in, and on each table it has the courses that you need to take in high school and what college degree you need and how much money you can make. It's sponsored by Novant. But what's different about that one is it's not for college seniors, it's for freshmen. They bring them in and their parents so that parents can encourage and work with them. The whole idea of SKIP is help me help your child. Help me help you help your child. Help me help you help your child. Involving families is very important. That's why we have you do the SKIP. Principals have great reservoirs of energy. You're the last bastion of hope. You got to be there first and stay there last. You are the one that, when everybody else is beat down, you're still ready to go. You got to be the Energizer Bunny. They promote school spirit and teamwork. Sometimes you see them sitting up on the roof reading books or getting their head shaved or a pie in the face or, the T-shirts and teams and those kinds of things. They foster that school spirit and teamwork. They develop leaders. They work with young people that are coming along behind them to initiate them into the profession and mentor them and make them better. And they hire good people. They have good help. If they don't have good people, they strive to make them good people. If they find people that are willing, they work to make them able. That's part of that Hershey and Blanchard, willing and able. When we talk about readiness, job maturity or readiness, whichever you prefer to call it, it's the function of willing and able. If you can find people, if you can hire people who are willing, your job is to make them able, not just send them to the classroom and let them do whatever they, to their own devices. You are to develop them. to that end, and the ethical piece of your job is to hire people to make them successful, I've developed a model. I know this is probably not the best title for it, but I call it MTSS for teachers. And the whole notion here is to take willing people and make them able. It's the ethical thing to do also. And I have this on this week's session, and I won't read it to you, but here is a copy of it. But what it proposes is that we work in PLCs and one-on-one mentoring, and we do a little whole group, but we work with teachers constantly in a continuous improvement model to make them better classroom teachers. Work Marzano's 9 high-yield strategies. And we don't wait and just put people on an action plan. We give them coaching and we give them help before. That's the ethical, humanistic side of it, that we don't wait until, to the point where we put people on an action plan before we seek to give them some assistance. And so, starting a traditional August 20 start date, by October 25th, we've already got low-performing teachers, as we've identified through walkthroughs and observations and maybe prior observations from the final year. We're already getting them mentors. We're getting them somebody to work with them, a peer coach on the staff. That we started that early, and we give them 9 weeks of that before we even start an action plan. And then we start an action plan, and then we continue to give them the coaching. And before we even get to any kind of a decision, we have given them 18 weeks of one-on-one individual peer coaching. We've given them work in PLCs every week where people have helped them in their PLC. We've done that all year long. We've done a couple of sessions of whole group. This is Marzano. Use this person. This is how you will be graded. This is how you will be evaluated. We've done that. We've done every week in PLCs, and we've done one-on-one peer coaching for 18 weeks. That's a half a school year with this person before we make it. Before we tell them, you can no longer come back and work with us. This is the humanistic side. This is what we're talking about in terms of the ethical consideration that you need to have for teachers and the willing and able, where you find people who are willing and you don't just let them flounder and be unsuccessful and fail, that you work with them to make them successful. Because we're going to start with beginning teachers from day one. They're actually going to get 27 weeks. 27 weeks of peer coaching before a decision is made to not re-employ them for the next year. They're going to get 27 weeks of all those things. I call it MTSS for teachers. It's kind of like the multi-tiered system of support that you give students that have been referred in your intervention referral students prior to an EC testing decision. You only had to do the 90 days that the federal government requires, but the right thing to do is 90 days before that. Is in MTSS, again, you only have to do the 9 weeks on the action plan according to state law. The right thing to do is do 9 weeks or double that time and have all of that 18 weeks of assistance with one-on-one peer coaching. That's the right thing to do, or the ethical thing to do. Lesson plan, the role of the principal. In 603, hopefully you were introduced to. Hey, Jennifer. Can you hear me, Jennifer?
I can.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm up to the lesson plan, the role of the principal. I've been covering other things. You can catch up the first half hour on YouTube. I'll continue on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. You have any questions before I continue on? Anything I need to answer for you?
Just the only thing, I'm working on my resume right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wanting to know if I don't want to put too much in there, but I want to put enough for them to kind of get an idea of who I am as a candidate. So would it be possible for you maybe to look over that for me, or?
Email it to me. I'll get it tonight.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem. Make sure your resume should be 3 pages. 1 page should be a cover sheet, 2 pages, and that's it. And don't try to make the print too small. Most folks are, need to be at least 12 point. Don't make it too small, but 3 pages maximum. 1 cover page, 2 pages, and make sure that your education since high school and your work experience since high school are both in chronological order with no gaps.
Okay.
I had a student send me one last week, and she's actually here in the building tonight. I'm at Gardner Webb, Charlotte, and she's actually here in the building. And I said, do you have a gap in your work? She said, well, I was, it wasn't professional work. She was having her own child, and she stayed out and was, did daycare and some other things. I said, yeah, but you could have been in prison for all I know for 3 years, as shady as you are. So, but those are the kinds of things that potential employers worry about. So make sure that chronologically we know from high school everything you've done in terms of your educational career and your work career.
Okay.
All righty. So
All right.
send that to me and I'll get it back to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Lesson plan, the role of the principal. Hopefully in 603, you folks were introduced to North Carolina General Statute 115C. That holds all the 550 education statutes of the state of North Carolina. The one that's most relevant to you as a potential administrator is 115C 288, which are the duties and powers of the principal. I will go through these quickly. This mostly is the management piece. And one of the things that we've been talking about in this course for the first 3 weeks is management versus leadership. And a lot of folks want to know what management is. This is the practical. When we talk about management, this isn't the theoretical. This is the practical. This is what the state expects you to do in terms of management. Now, this is not about leadership. Let me be clear. We've talked about transformational leadership, shared decision making, the TSS model that I just shared with you about how to take people who are willing and make them able. That's all leadership stuff. But there's a management side to it too, and the state defines fairly adequately here, I believe, what your job is as in terms of duties, which means your management function. To grade and classify pupils. That means you put them in class, you decide whether they go to the next class. I mean, that's a management. That's keeping up with their paperwork, their attendance, their standardized test scores, all that stuff. That's all part of your legal job. The principal assigns grades to pupils, not teachers. And so you make all those decisions. To make accurate reports to the superintendent and the local board. A lot of those kinds of things are your disciplinary numbers that go into Power School, your daily attendance, your school activity report, which comes out once a month, that goes to the superintendent and to the local board and to the state, DPI. The school activity report is what teachers are teaching what classes and what children are in those rooms. That speaks to highly qualified and also to class size. It also speaks to planning time and duty-free time. So your master schedule has to be in Power School so that it can be sent on a monthly basis to the superintendent and to the State Department. Your attendance is done daily, and then once a month it is sent to the superintendent and sent to DPI. That's called Principal's Monthly Report, PMR. I'll say that again, PMR, Principal's Monthly Report, is a report of attendance. The SAR is the school activity report, is your master schedule. Those both have to be developed and put into the computers that they're sent once a month because they change. Now, the reason why attendance is sent once a month is when the state allots money to the local district for a particular school or schools, they do it on the basis of per pupil, but they factor in average daily membership. So, for example, if you're a principal of an elementary school that has 1,000 students and your monthly PMR, your average daily membership was 95% or 950 students, at the end of that month, the state will not pay you for the 1,000 students that are on your roster. They will pay you for the 950 who showed up. That's why it's important and imperative that your attendance be accurate each day. You do not want to not get paid for students, but you also do not want to send the state a bill for students who did not show up. Now, that is a bigger problem. I had a high school in Charlotte, Mecklenburg that I obviously was supervising, and they were suspending children from school and not entering it into the database so that they did not show up as absent. So the state was sending money for students who were not coming to school. They don't like that. That makes them very angry. They make you, what do they call it, when you have to give the money back? You have to give the money back to the state. And they generally charge you a penalty on top of that. So they don't like it when you overcharge them. So it's imperative that your daily attendance and then your monthly attendance and your principal's monthly report be accurate. I'm sure you learned in 603 the modified accrual accounting system that North Carolina uses, which means that a school district needs at least a month. We used to keep more than that, but now in tough economic times, it's not much more than that. You have to have enough cash on hand to start your school year, and at the end of the first month, the state reimburses what you've spent and gives you, 1/10 of the money that comes. That's another thing. When we talk about the per pupil, I'll use a figure. This is not exactly accurate, but let's say that the per pupil in North Carolina this year is $5,000 per pupil. They only give you $500 a month. They don't give you the whole $5,000 up front. So you only get $500 per month for 10 months. So these reports that go to the superintendent and the local board every month, they're very important. They're about funding. They're about staying legal and not misspending the state's money. They're making sure that you comply with things like No Child Left Behind in terms of class size, highly qualified, that teachers get their planning time, that they get their non-instructional time or duty-free time, as we call it, that students get the right amount of PE, the right amount of reading or math or those kinds of things. That's what those are about. It's also about you have to turn in a monthly balance sheet for your school accounts in most districts. You can't make false report on records, requisitions, payroll, daily attendance of pupil, other things. If you do, they'll put you in jail. All right. The powers and duties of the principal to improve instruction and community spirit. That was one of those things that the teacher of the year was talking about. Principals do that. That's actually a requirement. That you improve instruction and community spirit. That is one of your roles. That improved instruction goes back to that MTSS model that I was just talking about. You are required to come up with some kind of a model like that in your school to make those who are willing be more able. That's a management requirement. Now, the leadership is implementing that plan, but the management piece is you have to have a plan on how you're going to improve instruction. The one that I would use would be something like the MTSS plan that's under this week's Zoom session 3. So, that's not just something you make up and just sit around and pontificate about. The state requires you to have a plan on how you're going to improve construction and community spirit. Now, the community spirit thing is pep rallies, bonfires, fundraisers that are like community barbecues and things like that. those are the community spirit kind of things. You have to conduct a fire drill and inspect for fire hazards every month. Everybody knows that you do a fire drill every month, and please remember that the main purpose of you as an assistant principal who will probably be in charge of fire drills when you're the new AP, wherever you get your first AP job, you'll be in charge of fire drills. You have to do that every month. Your primary responsibility will not only be see how long it takes to get kids out of the building, but to make sure that each teacher has in their hand their class roster from Power School. They should have a generated class roll in their hand and can count for all the kids that are on that roll. They can't just say, I got everybody. They must have their roll in their hand. Back in the olden days, horse and buggy times in North Carolina, we used to have these yellow registers, and we had to bring the yellow register out with us when we had a fire drill. Now we don't have that anymore. We now do it electronically, but we still have a roster sheet. You need to bring and make sure that teachers bring that out. Now, it's also inspect for fire hazards. In 603, I have an assessment inventory that I share with those people. If you would like one, email me. But what it is it's a list of things that when you do the fire hazard, walk around, you normally don't do it. You do it every month with the custodian, but generally once a year the fire marshal comes out and you do it with them. It's the questions that the fire marshal, the thing that the fire marshal is going to be looking for when you're checking for fire hazards. Now let me be clear. You do a fire drill every month and you do a walk around with a custodian every month to make sure that there are no fire hazards. But once a year, generally, you will get an inspection from the fire marshal. Now, I can actually share. I can actually see if I can pull that assessment inventory up for you right fast and show you what I'm talking about. There it is. All right, when the fire marshal comes out, and again, you're legally required to do this every month. You know, the principal or you can delegate it to an assistant principal. It's probably going to be your role. When you go out and do that every month, these are things you should be looking for, because when the yearly one comes with the fire marshal, this is what he'll be looking for. He'll be looking to make sure that your vehicular and human traffic is separated, that you don't have kids running off buses through the car lot or parents driving through buses, that you got surveillance outside, signage, that you keep your doors locked and you don't prop them open with heavy objects, classrooms that are locked when they're vacant, that you've got your red and green cards behind the door, you've got an emergency kit, what we call a crisis box, under the front desk. It has class rosters for every class and has all of your evacuation routes and plans and those kinds of things. Doors are locked during the school day. These are things about doors to the exteriors in good working order, mirrors, windows, light covers in laboratory and locker rooms are impact resistant. Nothing sharp, things aren't broken, things work. But your two-way communication, your loudspeaker and your button in the classrooms all work. You get your doors to your boiler room and power supply room are solid steel with concealed hinges, pick plates. Speaks to your fire extinguishers, your first aid kits, those eye wash kits in your labs, chemical storage. Nothing stored on the floor. It's 2 shelves up, eye protection. All these things are on. This is what the fire marshal will be looking for when he comes out. So I'll go back here. So that's, again, you do it monthly with your custodian. You do it yearly, one time a year with your fire marshal required by the state. And it tells you you have to file the written reports each month, inspect the building at least twice a month during the regular school session. We normally do it once a month. You're supposed to do it when we talk about twice a month. Basically, what we do is you do one fire drill and you do one walk around. That would be twice a month, as I just covered. To discipline students and assign duties to teachers with regard to discipline, well-being, and medical care of students. Obviously, you know that corporal punishment's not allowed. The standard, of course, for students is arbitrary and capricious when you're talking about discipline. Arbitrary and capricious means that you follow the code of conduct set down by your school district so that you, A, don't ignore activities, or you give two different punishments to two different kids for the same infraction, or you give more punishment than the code of conduct allows for. Arbitrary is when you punish one kid and don't another, or you punish them completely differently. That would be arbitrary. Capricious is when you go beyond what your code of conduct for your district allows. For example, if the maximum for smoking is 1 day out of school suspension, you can't assign a 5-day. That would be capricious. Discipline reporting, that's covered under G. Report certain acts of law enforcement and the superintendent. You also have to report all infractions that occur, or all incidents that occur on your campus have to be reported to state in Power School. You have to put all those referrals in there, remembering that there is no major, there is no minor. All incidents go in. I have too many principals or former assistant principals who thought that if they didn't assign a suspension, they didn't have to report whatever happened to the state. That's incorrect. We report incidents, not outcomes, to the state and to law enforcement. Under that thinking is if you shot and killed me, but you didn't get punished for it, then I'm not dead. The punishment is immaterial. I mean, the incident occurred regardless of what the principal would do. So I would actually have principals who would confiscate weapons off kids but not suspend them because believing they wouldn't have to report the weapon. That suspension is an outcome. We report incidents. And you are required to do that, to discipline students and assign teachers, and to protect school property, and then to report certain acts to law enforcement and the superintendent. All incidents have to be reported to the state of North Carolina in terms of Power School. Acts of crime and violence have to be reported to the superintendent and to law enforcement immediately. Now, don't get it twisted. Law enforcement comes first. Too many principals think, well, I'll call the superintendent. No, don't call the superintendent or his designee. When I used to get those calls, first thing I'd ask is, they said, we've got a gun on me. Have you called the police? Well, no, don't hang up and don't call me. At this point, I'm unarmed, wearing a suit. I'm not going to be a lot of help. If you've got an armed intruder on your campus, you need to call the police. Police first and then administration. Don't get it backwards. That delay in time could be very critical. So you are required to report certain acts to law enforcement and the superintendent. Those are covered under the disciplinary data reporting. I'll cover that later, I believe, this semester. I have that in one of our Zoom sessions. I'll cover that manual with you. That manual, I will pull it up for you right quick. I'm trying to monitor our time here. Let's see. Okay. Can you folks see that on the screen? I hope you can. North Carolina Disciplinary Data Reporting Procedures. This is, so you can Google this, North Carolina Discipline Data Reporting Procedures, and it speaks to incidents rather than outcomes, organized around incidents. You have to report all those. Tells you everything that has to be reported to the state, which is everything. It has all the laws in here about what must be reported to law enforcement. Again, the rule of thumb is if it's an act of crime or violence, it has to be reported to law enforcement and then to the superintendent's office. And if it's not an act of crime and violence, it's just an incident, then it's reported to our school. Here are the things that are acts of crime and violence: assault resulting in serious injury, assault using a weapon, assault on school personnel, homicide, controlled substances, alcohol, rape, robbery, sexual offense, sexual assault, kidnapping, indecent liberties with a minor. Those are the kinds of things that you have to call in. Also, things that are a violation of state law, like communicating threats, alcohol possession, a fray, which is a public fight, and disorderly conduct, those should be reported to law enforcement as well, and as well to the superintendent's office. All the rest of this stuff is just regular unacceptable behavior. You don't have to report it to the superintendent nor to law enforcement, but you do have to report it to the state. So that's the manual. I believe I have a session scheduled later this semester where we will cover that. Okay, stop share screen. Back to, okay. I kind of skipped over that one. To protect school property, that's one of those things where you graffiti, keep the place locked up. That goes back to that assessment inventory. If you follow it, you will protect school property. To make available school budgets and school improvement plans, which means you have to write a school improvement plan that has an instructional component, a staff development component, a school and community parent involvement component, a management component, including your master schedule, duty rosters that you can feed into PowerSchool and generate your school activity report. You have to have a cultural program, something like PBIS, that does discipline. You have to write a separate safety plan if in any one year your school exceeds the district or the state average in suspensions and or acts of crime and violence. Let me say that again. If your individual school exceeds the average number for your district or the state of acts of crime and violence or out-of-school suspensions, you have to write a separate safety plan if you're going to address those incidents that caused your school to be unsafe. So that's all in your school improvement plan. You also have to develop a budget. All fundraising activities, as you learned in 603, have to be approved by the central office before and then through the principal. Before they can be done, all monies must be collected and deposited daily. All money must be accounted for prior to. So please remember those things. Now, I have in 603, one of the first things I have my students do in that class is find their school budget. And I can't tell you the number who've come back to me and said, our principal said we don't give it out. Yes, you do. The principal is wrong. State law says that you have to provide, I'll read it to you. Principal shall maintain a copy of the school's current budget and school improvement plan, including any amendments to the plan, and shall allow parents of children in the school and any other interested persons to review and obtain such information or documents in accordance with Chapter 132 of the North Carolina General Statutes. So if I'm an interested person and I walk in, you're supposed to, in the front office, have a copy of those underneath the counter to hand to me. Your budget is public, and your school improvement plan is public. Those are not something that we don't give copies out. Yes, you do. Don't make that mistake. You'll get somebody to come in and ask you, probably from media, and then next thing you know, you'll be on the news. That won't go well. Those are to be made available. to evaluate certified employees and develop action plans, and that's what that MTSS plan that I was talking about. It goes back again to earlier that you were to make teachers, to improve instruction, while at the same time you have to evaluate and put teachers on action plans. Why not do them both together? Why not make it humanistic? Why not make it more transformational in terms of that's all one big plan where you're making teachers better? Yeah, you eventually may have to put them on action plans, but you don't start with the action plan. That's the whole. But now the action plan is not optional. It's in state law. Again, North Carolina General Statute 115C288. Law that principals have to do that. You have to try to improve instruction, you have to evaluate teachers, and then you have to put them on action plans to get rid of them if they're not good enough. So why not put all that in one package, humanistic, from a transformational leadership where you maintain the trust of your faculty. I was speaking to a group last night in Raleigh, a 605 group there. They're all my interns except one, and I was there with Dr. Stedman in his class last night. They were working on this same lesson that you're working on this week. And one of the things that I shared with them is you have to maintain the consent of the governed as the leader. You may have the worst teacher in the world on your staff, but if you get rid of them in a really rude or ugly or non-humanistic way where you just bums rush them out the door and treat them terribly, even if they're the worst teacher you've got, that does not go over well with your good teachers. You need to work just as hard with those people who maybe not even be good people, but it's not so much for them sometimes, it's for everybody else who you're going to be left working with. If they see you treat them rudely or unfairly or disrespectfully or unethically, then they wonder, would you do that to them also? And so I think, the point of my MTSS model is put it all together in a transformational leadership perspective. And I think you'll come out better in terms of having people buy into your leadership. To transfer student records, to sign driving eligibility forms, notifies the Division of Motor Vehicles when a student who holds driving eligibility no longer meets that condition. That goes back to lose control, lose your license. You're supposed to know if kids get in certain kinds of trouble, you have to tell DPI and Division of Motor Vehicles and their license is revoked. And then the last one is to establish school improvement teams. Obviously, you have to have a team to write that school improvement plan. And the idea here is that they added this one later on because what people were doing was just making their own plan and didn't have a school improvement team. The law now says you have to have a school improvement team who creates the school improvement plan. For many years, just principals did it on their own. All right. The last thing I want to cover with you tonight is what I've been talking about all night, ethics in the school executive. You have to be ethical in your treatment. Ethical means, that's to me is synonymous with transformational. Maybe not synonymous, but they go hand in hand. Transformational leaders deal with people from a humanistic perspective in an ethical and moral way. They don't treat people poorly or unkindly or disrespectfully or unprofessionally or illegally. They do all the things, equity, fairness, justice. They work on the four paradigms of ethics, which are justice, care, critique, and profession. Care is, fairness, equity, justice, care is loyalty and trust, concern and connection, nurtured and encouraged versus achievement, relationships, collaboration, shared decision-making, connections, attention and support, critique, power, critical theory, social class, human rights, profession, accountability for student academic and social success, models principles of self-awareness, reflective practice, transparency, and ethical behavior. Goes back to that Johari window, goes back to that Kurt Lewin test that I talked about to introduce to tonight's lesson, where you go back in and you look at those questions to see what leadership style you have. And what I want you to do is not just be able to answer the right answer, but know which is the right answer, and is that what you think first? Is that what are you choosing that answer because you know that it's the right answer, or that's exactly what you would do? Again, that's the principles of self-awareness and reflective practice. Safeguard the value of democracy, equity, and diversity. Consider and evaluate the potential moral and legal consequences of decision making. Promote social justice and ensure that individual students' needs inform all aspects of schooling. And have the best interests of students in mind. Rights, responsibility, and respect are the keys to making decisions that are in the students' best interest. And so those are the four paradigms of ethics that go along with leadership and management, that speak to the kind of leader that you should be, participatory, transformational, that go with the lessons that we've been doing. And so the practical part of this week's lesson is 115C 288. You can Google North Carolina General Statute 115C, and you can look at all. There's 550, just like this one. They cover everything in the school business. But this is one you need to become intimately acquainted with. This one you will be held accountable for when you get into the role. And as I said, I had a couple of things that you can use to help you with this, but this is your legal imperative. This is your moral and ethical imperative that goes along with it. All right. Let me look at my share screen and make sure I've covered everything else that I had up for the evening. I think I did. Again, you can look at these things. You can Google disciplinary data reporting procedures from DPI, and you can pick that one up. We'll cover it later, I believe. If not, I'll get to that one. The MTSS is on tonight. All the things that I've covered other than that are on our board for tonight. I hope that I haven't overworked you this summer. Again, you only have to do one of the three listed discussion boards each week until the last week. And then the last week, of course, you can do the one because it's on Strength Finder. So you've got your discussion boards, and it's not accidental. I've given you what I consider to be extra time this summer so that you can conclude working on your task stream portfolio. Make sure you get all those task stream things in there. If you need help with writing summaries and descriptors when you're putting together your final evidence narratives and your final submission for each of the 6 evidences, don't forget to go to Task Stream Tools. I've got some good things there that can help you with that process. If there's anybody that's still with me, if you have any questions, see if I've got anybody in my gallery. Yeah, I've still got Jennifer, and I see Gloria still online. Anybody have any questions before I sign out tonight?
I think I'm good. I hate I missed the MTSS part. It would have fit so well with what I worked on yesterday with my district and my principal. We actually went to the central office and did our self-assessments as a school.
Yes.
On that. So I think it's going to be really interesting pushing it down to middle school and then high school. But
yes, if you will look at tonight, Zoom session 3 on Blackboard, I have that document there. And of course, you can watch me later tonight after 9 on YouTube. You can see that, but that's the model that I have put together, and it kind of, again, it meets all the state requirements. It puts all that stuff in there where you're trying to improve instruction, leads you to your action plans and your evaluations. All the stuff that you're required to do as a manager is covered in that plan. I don't know. I think it's passable.
I think it'll be great to look at as my principal and I are having those discussions this summer.
Feedback, drop it in there. When you send me your resume, drop any feedback you have, and I'd appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Let me see. I've got one chat button here. All right. All right. I'm going to close that out. All right. Y'all have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.
Good night.